Pick n Pay is one of South Africa's leading food, clothing and general merchandise retailer. This Cape Town-based company has long been a champion of consumer sovereignty, focusing primarily on the discount retail market. The company operates through two segments, South Africa and Rest of Africa. Its South African segment operates in various formats under the Pick n Pay and Boxer brands. Its Rest of Africa segment is responsible for the company's expansion into the rest of Africa. It mainly focuses on food, non-edible groceries, clothing, liquor, tobacco, health and beauty products, pharmaceuticals and general merchandise. It also offers services such as third-party bill payments, financial transactions at till points, which includes mobile money, ticketing services, airtime sales and the sale of gift cards. The company operates on both an owned and franchise basis and currently has over 1,795 stores across all formats. This also includes its investment in TM supermarkets in Zimbabwe. Pick n Pay is one of the largest employers in the African continent with over 90,000 employees and numerous partnerships that help small businesses to propel. Over the years, the company has grown to encompass stores across other African countries including Botswana, Swaziland, Lesotho, Namibia, Zambia, and Nigeria. This strategy of always championing consumer sovereignty has helped the company generate billions upon billions over the years, with sales exceeding over $5.7 billion just this year alone. To understand the story of Pick n Pay more clearly, one has to go back to the 1916s, when Gus Ackerman, the father of Raymond Ackerman, opened a very first Ackerman store in Cape Town with a vision of making value-for-money products affordable to everyone. The Ackerman's brand appealed to the value-seeking consumer and attracted a broad audience. At that time when the store was operating, Raymond was studying commerce at the University of Cape Town under noted economist, W.H. Hutt, whereby the philosophy of customer sovereignty was instilled on the young Ackerman. After graduating from university, still in his early 20s, Ackerman went to work for his father's business as a trainee manager in 1951. However, Ackerman's first position at his father's company was a mere store greeter. In this way, Ackerman's father hoped to instill the importance of politeness for the store's customers, while at the same time, also helping Ackerman overcome his shyness. As time went on, he was promoted to work at the company's distribution warehouse, where he worked for 2 years. In 1960, Ackerman's was bought by department store rival, Greatermans, which was based in Johannesburg. Raymond was then offered a new position at Greatermans and served as manager at a series of small-town stores into the mid-1950s. The introduction of the first American-styled self-service supermarkets in the early 1950s inspired Greatermans to expand into food retailing as well. The company added a supermarket to its spring store, placing Ackerman in the store as assistant manager. The experience proved a life-altering one for Ackerman, who found his true calling in food retailing. Persuaded by the potential of the supermarket format in South Africa, Ackerman encouraged Greatermans to launch its own supermarket format, called Checkers, in 1955. That year, he was assigned to help open the first Checkers store in Joburg. But it failed, and so did 2 other stores that were subsequently opened in Germiston. Puzzled by the failures, Ackerman said to the board they must let him go to America, because none of them knew anything about running a supermarket. After a hell of a battle with the board, he was allowed to go on a trip to America alongside Wendy, his wife. There, Ackerman took a decidedly hands-on approach, working in nearly every area of the supermarket operation, from stocking shelves to serving in the butcher section. During his U.S. trip, Ackerman also met up with Bernard Trujillo, the so-called Pope of modern distribution, who held that customer sovereignty represented an enlightened form of self-interest. Trujillo became, alongside Gus Ackerman and Hutt, another major influence in Ackerman's rapidly evolving retail philosophy. When he came back after 6 months, he was so instilled with the know-how of how Americans ran their supermarkets and was ready to also put that into Checkers. Ackerman was all set to build the Checkers chain, but he ran into a great deal of resistance from the Greatermans board, because they saw Checkers as a department store, instead of a supermarket company. While lacking a free hand to develop the Checkers format and especially to implement his own retail philosophy, Ackerman nonetheless succeeded in expanding the chain from just 5 stores at the beginning of the 1960s to more than 85 by 1965. In that same year, Ackerman shared an award as an outstanding young South African alongside Gary Player. By then, the Checkers chain not only had become a leading supermarket group in South Africa, it also had begun to outpace Greatermans itself. The success of Checkers, however, led to soured relations between Ackerman and the Greatermans board. Ackerman, at a later interview with Sunday Times, revealed the relationship had reached a point where there was even a jealousy factor involved. In 1966, when he was 35, Ackerman was called into a room with executives from OK Bazaars, Woolworths, and Spar, whereby the chairman said to him he had to fix prices with those executives in order to have an advantage over competition, but Ackerman blatantly refused, because according to him, price fixing was not only illegal and wrong, but it also stood against everything he believed in. After storming out of the meeting, deep down Ackerman knew his days were numbered as managing director of Checkers, and 3 days later, the prophecy came into realization when the chairman called him to tell him he was fired. This was a really difficult time for Ackerman because 2 weeks prior, he had lost his father, and now coupled with his dismissal, he was really sad, confused, frustrated, and on top of that, didn't know what to do. Despite these enormous setbacks, Ackerman still held on to his retail dream. Not long after the news of his firing broke out, he got a call from a man called Jack Golden, who offered to sell him his startup called Pick and Pay. Ackerman had formed a relationship with Jack during the time he was hands on deck with Checkers. He's the one who personally gave Jack a tour of the stores he was running. At that time when he gave him a call, Golden wanted to exit supermarkets and figured the freshly unemployed Ackerman was his passport out. With no capital, Ackerman brought along 40 shareholders and entered negotiations with Golden, which dragged late into the night. Eventually, Golden sold the 4 stores he owned for over 620,000 rands. According to Ackerman, being fired forced him to get out of the frustrations of having to deal with Greatermans, and gave him the free rein to build what he wanted to build in the retail market. With Pick and Pay, he now had the freedom to implement the ideas he'd incubated since his US trip. In its first trading year, Pick and Pay achieved a profit of 300,000 rand on a turnover of 5 million rand. Turnover subsequently climbed to over 10 million rand and doubled the following year. By 1968, Pick and Pay went public, listing its stock on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Shortly afterwards, Checkers and OK Bazaars took on Pick and Pay and started a price war in the Cape. At the height of the battle, Ackerman received a letter from a Port Elizabeth businessman, offering to sell him his small supermarket. Heeding the advice of a friend who'd told him to treat the price war attacks as if it were a military campaign, Ackerman immediately left for Port Elizabeth, where he bought the shop the same day. 2 months later, a fully renovated Pick and Pay branded store opened its doors for business. This move forced Checkers and OK Bazaars to choose between expanding the price war they had launched, or withdrawing. In the end, Pick and Pay's rivals chose the latter, and the Cape Town company began its ascension to becoming South Africa's leading retail group. Pick and Pay quickly captured the attention of South Africa's financial community as well. By the end of the decade, the company had begun receiving praise from the financial press, and soon was named to the Sunday Times Top 100 Companies list. Ackerman's commitment to consumer sovereignty remained a major component of the group's success, helping to guide its operations. In this way, the company started to take on the wholesale sector, dominated by a number of government-backed cartels that had helped maintain artificially high prices on most goods sold in the country, including basic food items. Ackerman found ways to skirt the high prices, often imposed by the South African government itself. A notable example of this came early in the 1970s when Ackerman took the company's entire treasury to buy a warehouse full of cigarettes. When the government imposed price increases on new cigarette imports, Pick and Pay was able to sell its stock of cigarettes at a substantial discount. Pick and Pay continued to expand beyond the Cape Town region. Its move into the important Johannesburg market was unfortunately met with resistance. The company's own survival appeared at stake, after a suspicious fire destroyed its first store in Johannesburg. Although he didn't have the evidence, Ackerman had always suspected that the fire might have been caused by his competitors, and he also blamed the fire as the cause of his mother's death. Because after Ackerman's mother read about the fire in newspapers, she passed away as she couldn't no longer succumb to the pain of seeing some people trying to sabotage his son's blooming business. A regular person would have called it quits after the blow, but not Raymond Ackerman. The fire disaster made him more determined than ever to impose his retailing vision on the South African market. In 1973, the company announced that it would be building the country's first hypermarket store. a large-scale format, which combined department store offerings with supermarket operations. Pick n Pay opened the doors of its first hypermarket in 1975, smashing all previous sales records in its first year of operation. With Pick n Pay's rise to the top of South Africa's retail scene in full swing, Ackerman next attempted to expand the company's format into a new market, entering Australia with a highly successful store in Brisbane in the early 1980s. Yet the company's attempt to open a second store in Melbourne in 1984 became caught up in the growing international resistance to South Africa's apartheid policies. Ironically, Pick n Pay itself had long served as a model anti-apartheid group. The company had long been a champion of South Africa's own anti-apartheid movement. Long before the end of apartheid, the company's management had been fully integrated, with some 50% of all management positions held by black South Africans. Forced to withdraw from Australia, the company licked its wounds by expanding its South African retail presence, acquiring the Boardman's hardware chain in 1984. The purchase helped raise the company's profile and boost sales to more than 2 billion rand by 1986, more than doubling sales in just 3 years. The company continued to build the Pick n Pay chain as well, and by the end of the decade, the company operated more than 100 stores throughout the country. Despite its progressive policies, Pick n Pay was again caught by the political environment as apartheid came to an end. In 1994, the company found itself faced with a strike by its employees. Yet Ackerman turned this crisis into an opportunity for renewed corporate growth. The company worked out a new trade union agreement, but perhaps of more importance, set into place a new corporate culture to guide its entry into the new century. At the same time, the company established a new organizational structure, based on 2 core divisions: retail, which took over the various Pick n Pay formats, as well as the family franchise store format launched in 1994. And also, Group Enterprises, which took over the company's acquisition of a majority stake in the predominantly rural-based Score supermarket group, as well as other retail businesses. Increasingly, Pick n Pay also targeted international expansion, adding stores in the neighboring markets of Botswana, Swaziland, and Namibia. The company also briefly entered Tanzania, but sold its holdings there in 2002. Instead of moaning about how things didn't work out in Tanzania, Ackerman targeted a re-entry into the Australian market, buying up struggling retailer, Franklin's, in 2001. The purchase brought the company more than 50 stores under the Franklin's and No Frills formats, primarily in the New South Wales market. After continued losses year in and year out, Ackerman had to accept Pick n Pay's fate with the Australian markets once again, by selling its Franklin division to Metcash in 2011. In 2002, the retail giant paid up a whopping 185 million rand to acquire 36 Boxer stores, in order for the group to best serve the consumer marketplace that Boxer continued to dominate in. The company also maintained its commitment to customer service, launching in 2005 a partnership with Nedbank to launch Go Banking, an in-store banking service that featured checking and savings accounts customers could literally buy off the shelf. In 2007, Pick n Pay tried to expand its South Africa retail presence yet again by agreeing to acquire Fruit and Veg City, a chain which had over 90 stores at that time, but that move was ultimately blocked by the Competition Commission. In 2008, to further expand its retail offering in South Africa, Pick n Pay partnered with BP Garage to build over 120 Food Express stores at its fuel stations. The partnership has been a successful one and still exists to this day. In November 2010, Pick n Pay acquired a 25% stake in leading Zimbabwean food retailer, TM Supermarket, and that shareholding stake was further increased to 49% in 2011, which ultimately strengthened the company's presence in Zimbabwe. In March 2010, after a 43-year-long career with the company, Raymond Ackerman officially retired from his position as chairman of Pick n Pay. His son, Gareth Ackerman, took over from the old man, and the company still experiences growth under his reign. After nearly 55 years in operation, Pick n Pay has remained true to its philosophy of customer sovereignty. Raymond Ackerman's entrepreneurial skills catapulted Pick n Pay into one of the largest chains in South Africa. Abiding by the philosophy, if you can dream it, you can do it, and striving to always put the consumer first, staying innovative and engaging with customers, as well as recovering from mistakes, this brand is certain to continue growing from strength to strength.